All right, welcome back to the Out of the Woods podcast. This is I think over 50% of guests have been Miami guests. And I think it's just testament to kind of the network of people here and the bond that everyone created as they came down here. But excited to have Dan Snow on here. I don't even know what the right title for you is because you're involved in so many different things. But I guess we'll just say serial entrepreneur and investor, very, very heavily in the e-commerce world, social media world. Excited to have you on and excited to dive into some stuff here.
Yeah, I would say that title is about right. And more importantly, two formerly New Jersey guys now
I
living in
know.
Miami.
Yeah, we've done a pretty good job getting some more people down here. I mean, it's kind of like little New York, little New Jersey here. Um, and what's your kind of like synopsis now? You've been here for a little over a year or so, right? Like
Yeah,
what's your take?
I've been here. So I moved February 1st of 21, so a little over a year and a half. My take is that I tell everyone this: Miami's the best city in the world
Yeah.
to live. I can't think, and even this summer, I was traveling for 5.5 weeks. I was in many large cities and some islands, and everywhere I go, I'm like none of these cities come close to Miami from the quality of life, type of people you meet, my interests. I'm very involved, like health and fitness, um, water. I love water sports and all that. So to me, Miami's the best city in the world. Like I'm able to meet amazing people regularly. It's beautiful, zero tax. Like I can't think of anything else I could want other than mountains would be nice, but can't have it all. So
Even better than Tel Aviv. I know I think
yeah.
it's Israeli, right? You go back there a lot. It's pretty similar. I mean, at least from what I've heard, it's a similar kind of city and setup.
So Tel Aviv to me is a lot more Williamsburg-ish. Like it's structure, it's the infrastructure is just a mess. So what I like about Miami is that it's very clean. Like you walk, it's like the roads are normal, normal looking roads. Like it's well taken care of. Tel Aviv is just like all over the place. Like the Israelis call it balagan. Like it's a mess. So for that reason, I that's like the one knock I have against it. If it was as like put together as Miami, then I would definitely consider it to live. I would love to spend more time there. Just have a lot of family there and whatnot. But still, to me, Miami's the best, neck and shoulder.
You say the city of Miami is the sponsor of this podcast because we're always hyping it up when people come on. What do you think?
How
What's
about
your
you? What do you
prediction?
think? What do you think?
I mean, so I've been here for a little bit longer. Like we were coming down part time 4 years ago, back and forth, and then it was May of 2020. So maybe like 8 or 9 months before you'd gotten here, that we came down full time. And we've spent time in Fort Lauderdale. We've spent time in Miami. We're in Fort Lauderdale right now. I think this whole entire strip, anywhere from Palm Beach down to Coconut Grove, Coral Gables, is just some of the most beautiful places in America. I think the thing that I've always loved about it is just kind of the freeness of the society here. People aren't super judgmental. People kind of just do whatever they want. It's a melting pot of different cultures, lots of Latin Americans that went through different kind of socialist and communist regimes, and they come here and they want the opposite of that. So it just kind of builds this culture of kind of let people do what they want to do, like open businesses and kind of this free society. So I enjoy that. And obviously the lifestyle is great. I like to play golf. You can play golf here a lot. You can do, somebody brings you out on their boat on the weekend. Like there's always something going on. I mean, like 3, 4, 5 nights a week, I'm getting an invite to do something. And in New Jersey, when it gets a little cold, there's basically nothing to do. It's like, okay, let's go to like the mall or let's go to a
Yeah.
movie, or like, what do you do for 7, 8 months? It's just depressing.
Yeah, I would do nothing on the weekend to answer your point, which would lead me to working more, right? Because there's just like
Yeah.
nothing to do. Like,
There's
um,
something to be said about like San Francisco and New York as good places to start companies because you don't really have much else to kind of do. Obviously, in New York, there's a lot, but it gets cold in the winter and stuff, and you're just more focused maybe. But at the same time, there's benefits of just being healthy and out in
yeah,
the sun and meeting other people that are also great for business.
yeah, I think having a better quality of life should always come first versus putting in a few extra hours in your business because you're miserable. Um,
And you've gotten into much better shape too. I mean, you were already on that journey, I think, before you got here, but I'm sure it's helped a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. You know, living in the Northeast, it's like accustomed to having the winter bod, right? Because you get cold
Doesn't
when
matter.
when the
You can
weather.
hide it
Yeah,
behind a hoodie or something.
Miami, you're on the beach all year round, so you got to maintain. And
Yep.
it's just a very healthy city. It's easy and fun to stay fit, right? Like I live on the boardwalk. It's beautiful. It like makes me want to run. Versus being, let's say, in the Northeast, it's like disgusting and smelly in a lot of parts. So
What do you think happens here over the next few years? Does it continue the momentum? Does it continue to be kind of its own isolated real estate market where things are just always kind of hot and everyone wants to come here? Do you think it cools down at all?
I think that in the short term, I don't see a reason for the demand to slow down, especially as remote work becomes more accessible. I mean, it's like pretty much the standard, except for certain industries. Like I know some, in finance and real estate, a lot of those sort of companies are still mandatory in office. Like I have some friends, specifically in finance and real estate, that really want to move to Miami, and their companies just won't let them right now. Um, so outside of kind of those industries, it seems like there's still a huge demand for Miami, and for good reason. In my opinion, it's just a no brainer. Like, why would anyone that's, especially people who are making money, right? Like, why would you want to pay a premium to live in New York or California? I mean, to me, that doesn't it doesn't like it really doesn't make sense, especially when a lot of the times people would say, they would pinpoint, oh, New York is great because of the people. Well, if a lot of those people are now in Miami, like what's the what is the value prop of New York anymore? I don't see it, and it's why I get jaded, especially because New York has handled COVID so poorly, um, that I have like this disdain for it now, especially when people compare like Miami versus New York. But yeah, so I think there's going to continue to be demand, and for that reason, I think that the real estate market will continue to be competitive. We'll see though now with interest rates and everything that I'm sure that that's going to in the short term.
I think the majority of buyers down here are buying these homes in cash too,
Yeah, so that's the
versus
thing
what
is
they've
that,
been
and I
doing.
talked to a real estate agent yesterday actually. So the housing prices haven't come, and this is kind of what, to my knowledge, that it's really affecting the whole country. High level is that how the housing market hasn't come down much because people have money. In 2008, people didn't have money, and they were foreclosed. That's why it caused the housing crisis. So now there's the level of activity is just has gone down tremendously because it's the buyers and sellers are at a standstill because the buyers don't want to pay what interest rates were 6 months ago, pay the same price, and now interest rates have what more than doubled. Yeah, more
Yep.
than doubled in
Yeah, it's
that
over like
time period.
6.2,
Yeah,
6.3%
like
from two and a half.
in December, I got my condo at 2.75 percent interest, and now I think today I saw it's 6.3 for a 30-year fixed mortgage. So like that's
Yeah.
insane.
And if you're a seller too, I mean, unless it's your second home, then you got to go find another house and get a new mortgage at much higher rates. Like, so supply is going to be somewhat capped in that sense as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it just seems like the level of activity is, well, that's what's not seems, it's what's happening. Is level of transactions has just gone down tremendously for that reason. I'm sure prices will come down eventually, maybe over the next 12 months if rates continue to rise, but we'll see. I'm still very bullish
Yeah,
on Miami though.
for sure. Likewise. So let's get into some of your backstory. I mean, from what I know, I mean, I think I first kind of ran across you when you were just getting out of college. I think you had a business in college, right? That kind of got you. Did you end up dropping out, or did you end up getting a degree, but you had this business already kind of like humming and up and running, and then ended up just keep going with it? And then before that, were you a lifelong entrepreneur, like as a 4, 5, 6, 7 year old kid, or is it something that you picked up kind of later on?
So the first question, I had a few businesses in college, so it got started just growing social media pages, which was like my first entryway into just like the online world, right? Um, and that led me into growing an audience, monetizing an audience, which led to like my first business in college, maybe you're referring to. Caffeine Digital, which really blew up. We had 3,000. It was a self-serve advertising platform at the time, specifically geared towards publishers on Twitter and Instagram. So essentially, whoever had a large following, typically for niche-based audiences, like someone who owned a makeup audience or sports or comedy, whatever. Eventually moved into influencers. But yeah, that business blew up my senior year of college. We did like $8 million in revenue that year. But I stayed in
And
college.
you're like in your dorm room, like
Yeah,
just balling out with this business. Like, was it cash flowing a lot too, or was it more you're
yeah,
reinvesting?
yeah. I mean, that year I paid over $1 million in taxes, so it made a lot of money.
And
But
meanwhile, you're going to like some business class at school, like they're trying to teach you like the four P's of marketing or something.
it was actually pretty funny because I was a biology major. I was pre I was in the accelerated dental program, and I wanted to take the entrepreneur class, which it was a 400 level business
You should
class.
just taught it.
Yeah. So it was a 400 level business class. So I had to like write letters to the dean of business and like show him that I had these businesses and do this whole like unnecessary process.
This is Ramapo,
This
right?
was at Rampo, yeah. And it was just like, just like, I don't want to,
You couldn't convince them.
it just wasn't like, there was no value in the class. Like all we did was just read case studies on a few startups and like that was it. Like that was it. We read like a Harvard review, whatever case study on,
Yeah, yeah.
I remember it was like Rent the Runway and Urban Decay and like random startups. And like that was it. We just read them and talked about them and that was it. But yeah, I was a biology major. I stayed in school because number one, I think my parents would have had a
Parents.
heart attack. Number two, my business really took off my senior year of college. And I figured, let me like, number one, I enjoyed college. I had a great group of friends. I was in a fraternity. I was in a relationship at the time. So like there was a lot of good things going in college for my social life as well. And I figured that I could do both. So, and it's what I did. I was in class literally on my laptop, like working on my business. So just did like the absolute bare minimum. Got my
Did
first.
your friends like know what you were up to? Did they know you were making like a few $1 million a year? Were you like changing your lifestyle in school and being like the baller on campus that had like bottle service in their dorm room or something?
I didn't change my lifestyle at all. I didn't buy. I didn't. The only thing I bought like a Rolex. I bought a Rolex. Uh, Outside of that year, I didn't buy anything. The next year, actually, I bought my condo my senior year of college, but I only closed on it after I graduated. But like during college, I didn't ball out. Didn't buy bottles at clubs and all that. I didn't tell anyone. I don't think I told anyone at the time how much I was making, even my parents. But a lot of so my friends had an idea of what was going on because essentially my whole fraternity started working for me my senior year of college. Like my whole friend group, everyone was working for me. Showed them what to do. Um, but yeah. So and then to answer your other question, anyways, yeah. So after college, that's when we connected with GoatCase. So I started GoatCase in 2016. I graduated 2015. So a year essentially after I graduated, I launched GoatCase.
Was the natural progression you had saw like how powerful influence are for driving business, and you're like, okay, what's a product that we can sell that we can tap into this influence and channel to to build a brand around it?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So I wanted to build a more sustainable business because a lot of the ads through our platform were essentially through affiliate marketing. And at the time, Instagram and Twitter were starting to crack down on these just like tracking links. So it just made the entire business a lot harder to send traffic organically. And that was also when the algorithm then got introduced. So there was just a lot of things culminating. And I just didn't foresee specifically this. We tried turning it into a more sustainable business with just like a true self-serve platform, connecting influencers to brands, which was pretty ahead of its time because this was
Yep.
2015, right? And now people are still trying to do this in 2022 and raising tens of millions of dollars to do it. But me and my partner kind of had a falling out at the time as well. and kind of just like stopped going that route. So so it's exactly what you said. It was a natural progression. We had an amazing ability to send traffic via influencers and whatnot, just as we were doing for the offers on our platform, and found products, which led to be multiple products that we then leverage these kind of relationships and whatnot.
How did you
Um,
make the decision, like what product to even go into first? I mean, there's millions of
yeah,
suppliers out there, and I guess did you go through Alibaba to find samples and suppliers and stuff?
Yeah. So we had a whole testing process at that time. My partner, Matt, and John, my brother. So we were at one point testing, 5 products a day through ads and influencers to see kind of outliers and what we would look for, in terms of conversion rates, return on ad spend for just kind of like generic content. And then there was a progression. So if like there was an outlier that we could see, profitability up front, typically we would go for a product that has a wide ranging audience, because that was kind of like what was best for influencers and Twitter, which we had a huge ability to send traffic from Twitter at the time. So that's why the phone case worked, right? Because everyone has a phone. It was a sticky phone case, so we found all the different ways people could use it and created customized content for those audiences.
It lended itself really well to like user generated content
Exactly.
and just like that remarkability of like, wow, this is so different and interesting.
Exactly. So at the time specifically, it was like typically what we found is things that can sell through video that you can see an effect, right? So like our 2 biggest products were the phone case, you could see it stick, and shapewear, where you could see that like the effect it creates with a woman's body. So through video. So and then we just we repeated that process for dozens of products. Um, yeah, and then to answer your other question, so I was definitely a lifelong entrepreneur. I was that kid like selling gum on the school bus. I don't know
The
how
young hustler.
I hustle. Yeah, I've always been that person. I was always kind of like, even in video games, addicted to, like, I got addicted to video games because I just enjoyed that process of like going through the levels and the gamification of it and so forth. So when it came to like running online businesses, it was kind of, um, you know, to me, kind of like a video game. So that was how I kind of was able to really enjoy what I did early on. But yeah, so I was always an entrepreneur, but I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad is an aerospace engineer. My mom is an occupational therapist, and none of my uncles, cousins, no one in my family is an entrepreneur. And I got a ton of pushback from my parents for years. So I had no support from my family initially, no support from my friends. So if anything, I think
Yeah,
that
New Jersey's not like the most entrepreneurial ecosystem either. It's not like you don't grow up with a bunch of friends that go on and start like, technology
yeah,
businesses or fast growing businesses. It's a lot of, mom and pop kind of businesses,
yeah.
or they just work, in finance in the city or something. There's pretty predefined tracks, I feel like, for everyone you grow up with.
Yeah, and it's honestly it's really interesting hearing people's take on this, because I've met a lot of people that said I had support from my parents and it was great, and then some people kind of, so I've met another, plenty of other people that said I didn't have support from my parents, and I attribute this to my business not growing as fast as it could have. How I see it is my lack of support gave me kind of a chip on my shoulder, which like allowed me to, want, but I'm also a very competitive person, to kind of like prove it to them. And that was actually a big reason why I never told anyone about my initial success. Cause like I, wanted to just like, I don't know, keep it quiet
I'm
or
sure it had
whatever,
like some
to make it
staying
look bigger.
power.
I was also actually very scared. Another big reason I was scared that I would fail. I didn't want to show success and then have failure and then like go down from this high to this low, which was like, scary to me at the time because I was 21, 22, and it seemed like unsustainable for me to like keep growing businesses and whatnot. But yeah, so if anything, my lack of support early on, I think, was a big reason why I was so successful, was because it gave me that chip on my shoulder to kind of prove everyone wrong, which definitely motivated me.
Yep. And what you learn, when you got into the e-commerce business, now you have a product, now you're selling it yourself, first party. what was kind of the evolution of influencer marketing from when you started in 2015 to when you sold the physical product businesses and stuff? Now you've gotten back into like having your own brand and stuff, but what kind of changed around influencer marketing at the time? And then also it looked like you started to actually do the fulfillment yourself. And I remember seeing videos and pictures of a bunch of these mailers like in your warehouse kind of packed up and stuff. Why'd you decide to go down that route to do it yourself? And will you ever do that again?
So I'll answer the second question first. So I came, this was a really, I always tell everyone the worst decision I've ever made was trying to do fulfillment myself. Everyone told me not to. And, but when you run the numbers, it was, first off, you have to keep in mind also, this was 2016 and, there was no
The ship
communities.
bobs, the shipmunks, all those weren't
Yeah.
as like
So number
prevalent.
one, but the other thing is that there was no true communities as there are now about connecting with other people that have brands, on Twitter, right? The D2C community, none of this existed in 2016. So it's not like I can like get easy accessible information from like successful people unless I reached out to them on LinkedIn or whatever. So the kind of like accessible information growing a business or growing an e-commerce business wasn't as, yeah, kind of like I said, accessible. So it was stubbornness, and it was also a function of my prior business was all digital. Like I didn't it honestly felt like I made too much money too easy, and it wasn't real. So I wanted to like get my
Be able to
hands
touch
dirty, sort
something
of
on a
touch
daily
something. You know
basis.
what I mean? And
100%.
I didn't. I guess I didn't. I realized very early on that I made a mistake, and the mistake just got bigger and bigger and bigger faster because the business just blew up from day one. Like there wasn't a ramping up period. Our first week we already had 50,000 units ordered, and we had moved offices like three times. So we kind of got ourselves in this deep, deep hole and never slow down. So the problem's getting big, it's just getting bigger, pushed back more and more. Because it's really hard to, as you know, to try and switch warehouses in a scaled business, right? Like you essentially can't ship orders for 2 weeks, or more, which is a big freaking issue.
Yeah.
And just the whole it's just a huge pain in the ass. So eventually it just got so big that we got rid of it. We got a good deal of fulfillment because we were doing so much volume. The fulfillment center paid for the entire process. They paid for our lease even in the warehouse. um, but along the way, I think I always attribute uh, a big reason why not as many customers were repeat customers as they should have was because of the issues we had during the fulfillment process, that affecting the customer experience.
Yep.
So it was the biggest mistake. I think we fulfilled though over like 1 million orders during my time period. It was some of the most stressful days I had. I got so fat during my first Black Friday. I was packing orders. We were doing, hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, and we stopped marketing, and I was packing orders. Like that was the stupidest thing ever. It was such a bad
There's
idea.
something good about it, just being able to have those stories and experiences, though. Like to look back on and be like, "Wow, that was like so ridiculous," but at the same time, you did it. You know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's great stories, and we have great photos and whatever from it. But now I get to tell everyone, learn from my mistakes, right? Do not do this, and I think it resonates with people.
Yeah.
So yeah,
100%. And then I was curious too, just because in about 2016, my perspective on influencers was, influencers are driving so much of the brand recognition and the sales and the traffic. Why aren't these influencers spinning up their own brands versus like kind of just like snap, labeling themselves, attaching them to different brands and getting a 10, 15, 20% cut. So I always felt like, hey, let's start developing brands for these influencers. And that's kind of played out over these last few years. But have you seen that where are influencers still as effective in terms of driving traffic to existing brands versus developing some of their own? Like what's been the trends over the last few years?
I mean, comparing it to 2016, you can't compare. You know, it's night and day. There was no out there. It was chronological, so pre algorithm on social media. Um, Influencers were a lot more valuable because you could essentially predict how much traffic they'd be able to send because it didn't deviate too much from the norm or your other
Yep.
experience with people, similar audiences, etc. So it was a lot more predictive, and for that reason, you could scale it a lot easier because you kind of had an idea of what to expect from that traffic. Now it became so hard because number one, influencers got incredibly more expensive, um, and their reach decreased substantially for the most part. Um, so for that reason, obviously, it's a lot harder to become profitable leveraging influencers. I still think that influencers are essential for growing an actual brand, right? Like you can drive revenue from from ads, but if you're solely reliant on ads, to me, it's hard to build an actual brand that way because people you get brand equity from what I see likeness from influencers, and if you're doing at scale, you're able to get more and more of those influencer celebrities, whatever likeness, and that's how people kind of recognize your brand. So, and you see that even with some of the biggest brands today, some of the biggest brands that have been acquired, like On It, people don't say, "Oh, On It." I see it on a Facebook ad. They say immediately say, "Oh, On It, Joe Rogan," right? Like, so you see that, right? Fashion Nova. People think multiple things. They think Cardi B. They think the Kardashians. They think so. I think influencers are absolutely essential for building a brand, but if you just want to generate revenue, I don't think they're essential. But yeah, so if that answers your question.
Is it kind of like like a dumbbell approach where the small micro influencers at scale do a lot are really impactful, and then the biggest influencers in the world are really impactful, but maybe somewhere in the middle is less impactful because there's people like Joe Rogan, Kim Kardashian stuff. No matter what they do, that brand is going to just take off immediately. It's going to be doing a few $100 million in sales in the first year or two or something. But is that what you see? And is that even feasible for a brand to be paying those types of people? Are they untouchable from a cost standpoint? And do the micro influencers still work at scale?
I don't use micro influencers for traffic. I've never really had much success with that. I use them as I just call them. I don't even call them micro influencers. I just call them creators. So if I want content, then I'll leverage micro influencers for specifically creative for ads that might represent a demographic that I want to go after. So I personally haven't seen micro influ, and I know other people have had success, but just my own experience, I haven't had success seeing micro influencers make an impact on revenue. But they're obviously great for content, and that can be pretty, meaningful if you're able to get creators that can create content for the ads that you're running and whatever. But yeah, just like you said, it's kind of the people in the middle that are this like in between where they don't have that great like emotional relationship with their audience enough to drive traffic or have purchase intent. So that's exactly the type of people that we've tested with and just aren't great for investing money into. So yeah.
When it comes to working with, if you're going to go after the ones that have a great engagement rate and are well known and can bring brand equity to a brand and stuff, how do you go about negotiating a deal with them? Like, what do they care about these days? Is it all about equity for them? They want the upside. Is it all is it cash up front? And if you're an up and coming brand that's maybe only doing a couple million, but you really believe in it, but you don't have the cash to be investing in somebody like that, is it still possible to get somebody of that caliber in the door if they really love the product?
So the last 2 to 3 years, I haven't been too deep on influencer at that scale like I was in the past. So it just hasn't, because we've mainly just been focusing on ads. But from what I've seen, um, as a whole, people still want the same thing. They want money, right? You can find people that might be interested in equity or get creative or whatever, but I would say it's more the exception, not the case. So in general, influencers still just want money. They want to get paid, post it, and it's still kind of the same thing that it's always been. But sure, you can definitely find people that can get creative, but it's definitely not the standard.
Yep. Cool. Well, I want to transition to the back half and just, and we can go through kind of Rap TV and the the agency as well, because I'm curious kind of how those are faring through some of this stuff. But what's your take for somebody who's kind of hiding under a rock and not looking at the economy or Twitter or the news or whatever? What's your take on what's going on in kind of the economic environment, and how much do you think it impacts startups, and how much founders should be thinking about it, and how much they should be just kind of focused on their day to day and their business?
So I would say, like, right now, if you're a business owner and you're not kind of thinking in the sense as like right now is just survival mode to me, like that's what it feels like, right? You're seeing signals from big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies. There's layoffs happening everywhere. I have, an anecdote. I have a friend that has had a great job, award-winning employee, et cetera, um, laid off because of budget cuts. That's it. Lost accounts, whatever, and that's it. Completely out of nowhere. And I think there's a lot of examples like that going on. Um, and you're seeing it everywhere, right? You're seeing it from the venture-backed businesses. You're seeing small businesses not being able to be able to raise money. Definitely, people who are trying to raise money are struggling in every category. Specifically for direct consumer brands, I've talked with a lot of VCs that are just no longer even touching the category. So it's definitely becoming an issue. I mean, it has been an issue. So for me, it's just like survival mode. That's really it. Cash is king, whether you're an investor, business owner, etc. And if you're not thinking that way, then I think it's going to be problematic, because I think these economic issues are still in the early stages.
And why do you think that it's been such a dramatic shift so quickly? Like, why have companies had to lay off so quickly, or change their business plans, or change their funding strategy? Is it because we were so used to such a frothy environment that all of our operating decisions and budgeting were based on this kind of like crazy growth, and now that that's kind of changed, we have to change the plans? Or did a lot of companies kind of be flat footed over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a function of the market has changed. The market was just dictated on growth, right? Even on the public markets and private venture, everything, it's just growth. Like, it doesn't matter if you're making money, losing money. Like, growth is what people cared about. Now people care about profit and having a real sustainable business. This is true. Like I said, a public market, private market. I spoke with an anecdote. I spoke with a CEO of a venture backed company who's now struggling to make payroll. And last year she said, the VCs told her told them to blow $20 million, because they just wanted growth. Now that these businesses are running out of cash, and the VCs want them to make profit. So I think that's a big reason why you're seeing these huge layoffs in a lot of these fast growing tech companies, just because the market's changed. It's gone from just growth to profit. And as well as when I just like I said, it's become a lot harder to raise money. So because people no longer have that in front of them, and the market was so easy to raise money that they were able to just lose money. And if you don't have that kind of um, if you don't have that I don't know what the word I'm losing the word for it. If you don't have that in front of you, then you have to just focus on dealing with the money you have at hand. Then your mentality operating a business has changed. So it's also going to be interesting now because just as a function of the entire labor market, like the labor market has been insane. The employees have had all the leverage, all the power. Retention has been awful for employers. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that's going to change over the next 12 months with all these layoffs happening, and how that's going to affect the job market and the salaries and comp and all that other stuff.
Yeah. To your point, like it hasn't there's still a lot of room to go there. Like on the employee side, it's still a very tight labor market. There's still people jumping ship from companies and they feel okay, that they're going to find another job quickly. A lot of these people that are laid off are going to other companies pretty quickly. So there does seem to still be a lot of room to the downside for some of this stuff to get a lot, harder for both employees and companies. And I've heard the same thing when it comes to like direct to consumer e-commerce brands just being unappealing to investors because there's not many case studies that show that you can have a successful kind of venture scale outcome. Even some of the ones that have gone public have been hammered, like Allbirds and Warby Parker and stuff because they chronically, mask a bad business model with like external funding. And I think that, that's one of the issues with all the funding that went into e-commerce brands is they're just hard to scale. There's a physical component to it. There's products, there's operations. They're not necessarily meant to scale 10x, 100x in a short period of time. And they're capital intensive. And then you had this kind of thought process that, they can scale as quickly as like a SaaS company. And I'm as a VC, like I need you to push on the pedal because you're not growing as fast as this other company in our portfolio that's a SaaS company. That creates a lot of bad incentives and a bad behaviors. And now, now you have a bunch of companies that kind of went down that path that it's going to be very hard for them to kind of shift the
Yeah.
mentality. And then if their investors are like, hey, sorry, but we're not going to, foot the bill and help you kind of get through this. Like who do you think's to blame in those situations? Is it the CEO and the founder that took the money and knew the business didn't work but was being pushed down a certain path, or is it the investors?
It's really tough. Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to say because I think every situation is different. Because the thing is, there still are the fast growing consumer brands that are public, that are profitable and still getting affected the same way as the ones that are losing money, right? Like solo brands.
Did you
Um,
see Hero Cosmetics sold whatever
yeah,
600 million? They
600
were like
million.
40% EBITDA margin or something.
That's absolutely mind blowing. It's great. I've never heard of a brand that scale that has that margins that high. Insane. But
Yeah.
yeah, so there's like solo brands, the figs, like there's publicly traded consumer brands that are profitable and still getting absolutely destroyed on the public markets. So it's not just the ones that are losing money and just cared about growth, right? That had these unsustainable um, um, business models. So it's happening to the ones that are also, in my eyes, doing a great job and still getting affected negatively. So it's just but it's not just consumer brands, right? It's like even tech companies, like they're getting absolutely destroyed, private and public, in the last 12 months in growth. So it's really just a whole market right now, and yeah.
How have you run your businesses over time? I mean, coming from New Jersey, starting from nothing and bootstrapping, like you typically have a different mentality than maybe the West Coast, like offense, run and go and make money one day in the future. Have you typically tried to run them cash flow positive and reinvest that capital into other things?
Yeah, so I've bootstrapped since day one, all my companies, and it's always just been a function of profit first and reinvesting that into growth. And typically, in our organization, if it was us growing brands, reinvesting that into influencers, into inventory, et cetera, into people, agency, investing that into different departments, into different leaders, and et cetera. So, and I always joke with my friends, like we're doing everything the wrong way. I was always we're trying to make profit, and there's these companies that just lose money that raise tens of millions. Like I can't wrap my head around it. So yeah,
Especially when they let you sell secondaries along the way, where you can keep losing money, but you can still cash out
yeah.
10 million, 20 million.
But the thing is, I think now it's like a lot of these people are coming down to reality, and a lot of these companies that are on paper worth even hundreds of millions of dollars, founders at the end of the day could devote a decade into it and have a $500 million company on paper and make no money because they raised so much money. And especially now, if you're going to see a lot of companies raise down rounds and such, they give away all their upside essentially to the investors. So a lot of these companies are now have put themselves into tough spots, especially ones that raised more than they needed. So yeah, it's just I think just a function of how the market's changing, and it just shows how quickly it can change. It's really insane. So
Yeah, yeah. It was so abrupt. And now, I mean, you've got the agency with your brother. It's kind of full circle in a way because you had the ad platform, then you had a brand, then you had the agency, and you're kind of getting back into servicing other companies. I mean, it's been a really even before the stuff happening in the economy and the interest rates, it's been tough go for e-commerce. I mean, it's obviously from a top line growth standpoint, there's been a lot of net new growth and opportunity, but operating wise and cost wise, there's been all this delays in inflation and stockouts, and you have shipping containers from overseas being incredibly expensive. Like it's kind of been being punched in the face for the last 3 years, e-commerce. And what have you how do you see your clients kind of navigating that, and how are they faring right now and navigating it? And do you see any opportunities as an agency to potentially maybe pick up some brands and bring them in house and potentially operate them?
yeah, so I wouldn't say last 3 years because 20 I think
Yeah,
20, the second half
two.
of 2020 and first half of 2021 was the best 12 months of e-commerce I've seen in my entire career, right? Because the the cost for advertising were incredibly low, conversion rates were incredibly high, and everyone was just buying stuff online because there was home all day. So iOS 14 impacted all of that, and then everything else that you mentioned. Then it became just a really difficult environment for advertisers and brands and everyone after that. So um, well, and then
Yeah,
so
just curious, like how have you seen the brands that I don't know how many brands you're working with across Snow Agency, but how did they kind of navigate some of the tricky situations over the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months, and now going into this kind of new normal going forward? Like what are you seeing from the portfolio, and then also do you see opportunities as an agency to potentially pick up some of these brands and bring them in house and start operating them?
yeah, I'm definitely seeing just like I mentioned before, like how business owners should be thinking. It's like I see a lot of them just into survival mode. They're cutting costs where they can. They're not using specific apps and services that they might have been before. Stuff that was before a luxury to them, they're cutting employees. So definitely seeing that kind of survival mode going on. Um, you know, it's definitely been harder, especially post iOS 14 and stuff and everything else happening in the economy lately. It's definitely been a harder landscape in just the advertising industry. Um, so yeah, that's how we're kind of seeing it. But because there's been a lot of churn in the agency world, just in general, because brands oftentimes like to think it's the agency, not them as an operator, et cetera. There's definitely been opportunity to get new accounts in the door, and great brands and so forth. So
Yep.
there's definitely opportunity for that reason.
Yeah. In general, you're a pretty, from what I know from, knowing you for a little while, you're a pretty opportunistic person in terms of like, investment opportunity. I remember we were sitting at dinner, you're talking about buying NVIDIA stock because, the semiconductors are about to be supply constrained and profit margins are going to go up and stuff. You also do your own personal investing and, rental properties and stuff. For somebody in your position, let's say you have some cash on hand, what are the opportunities? Because in the rockiest climates, typically creates the best buying opportunities. Are you looking at things externally and saying, hey, this is a buying opportunity right now, or is somebody like you sitting on the sidelines and saying, hey, I want to wait and see what happens with things?
Yeah, so good memory, but it's also a good thing I sold that entire position because I had a lot in there, and pretty much sold everything, but not everything, but essentially all my tech stocks, which was a good move. But it's also such a good. It's just like we're talking about how the market shifts and changes and such. It's like I don't understand how and I still say this, like as an investor, everyone has said the best thing to do as an investor is to not sell. And then these same people are saying, why did you not sell? So I'm like, I can't wrap my head, all these, you read all these books, everything tells you to not sell, essentially. Just wait. But then now everyone is saying sell when you have like I just don't understand that. Like that doesn't make sense. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. Um,
I think everything's contextual around what's your time horizon. Like you'll never be able to time every market. You'll never be able to get in at the right
exactly.
time, get out
You
at the
can't
right
time.
time.
Yeah, you can't time the market. But it's like these same people, specifically that work in the financial industry, even people that I respect that say the same thing. Yeah, what's your time horizon? Don't sell. But then they say, you know, you should have sold. Why would you not sell? So yeah, I just find that to be really interesting. But anyways, yeah. So I'm sitting on the sidelines right now. I'm conserving more cash than ever, and I'm waiting for opportunity. I'm also talking with a lot of people that are a lot smarter than me, specifically around finance and the overall markets and real estate and stocks, the public markets, etc. So it seems to me, from a lot of the people I respect, that now is not well on the stock market. You know, you should always dollar cost averaging specifically into the indexes. So that's essentially the only thing I'm doing right now. Um, Outside of that, I am not buying anything. So I'm still just kind of waiting and seeing. I'm like I said before, I think it's still early. You know, I don't see a good opportunity to buy real estate right now because, just like you mentioned, prices haven't come down yet, even though the rates have gone up tremendously. So I don't see opportunity there. Um, yeah,
I think a lot of people are in that same boat. They're just to kind of wait and see. You know, even VC and private equity have all this money kind of sitting on the sidelines, and they're waiting to figure out like, because you never know. You never want to catch a falling knife. Are we at the bottom? Are we not at the bottom? You know, and it's just very hard to tell because things were so overinflated for so long. So it's
yeah,
hard to know like what equilibrium looks like.
exactly. So for that reason, that's why I think a lot of people got caught with that, right? Like picking stocks, picking cryptos, picking alts, and thinking they're a genius because every this random stock went up 300%, whatever, and comes crashing down, and they're holding the bag. So, and you get so much of your time and attention sucked up in that, and emotions, even myself at times, right? So now I'm going with a much more conservative approach, just going into index funds, and it's great. I don't have to look at the stock market every day. I don't get emotionally invested. I'm buying, very conservatively, so it definitely allows you to sleep better at night and not have to keep up with all the craziness of what's going on, when to buy, when to sell, etc. So that's definitely, it's the direction I'm going right now, at least.
Yep, makes sense. Cool. Well, last question that I typically have been ending on with all the guests is, if there's a founder or team listening to this and they're one of those companies that's kind of has their back against the wall, they're struggling to survive, they have to make tough decisions, maybe they have limited runway, maybe 3-6 months or so. If you're in that situation or you're advising that founder, what are some of the things that you're telling them right now?
So you're the advisor telling the founder.
Yeah, you're a friend of the founder, you're their advisor, they're in this really precarious situation, they took bad advice or they made bad decisions and now they're trying to get themselves out of this, this hole, and they have their back against the wall. What would be some of the things that you're telling them right now?
I would say to go read Hard Things About Hard Things first, because I think that book does a does a great job of summing up, on a big level right now what's going on with so many companies. So other than that, though, I would say you have, I think that what a lot of companies are doing with, if you're in that specific position, um, making hard cuts and hard decisions is, while hard, is necessary. Even if you have emotional ties to some of those people, etc. I think that it's, you know better than the outcome of the business potentially going going bankrupt if you really only have 3 months of runway left. And it's time to get creative. I know a lot of these founders also have been uh, not as hands-on as they should be, which in effect has allowed a lot of them to get in the situations they're in now. They weren't as close to their finances. They weren't as close to their team. So I think now is the time to just get in that kind of survival mode and immerse yourself a lot more than ever into the business.
Yep. I think sometimes moments like this where you have to kind of really get focused and grind it out are some of the biggest breakthroughs in the business. Like some of those early days when you have very limited resources is where the most progress gets made. And then in the middle, like you're saying, kind of the fat times where things are good and they're kind of steady, you disengage a bit. And, for the people that take it seriously and dig into the business, could put them on a much better trajectory than they were on before.
Yeah. The other thing I would say also is a lot of times, especially in a multifaceted business, if you're not looking too closely into the P&L of multiple departments, like you'd be shocked at what you're finding. So taking a close look at that and doubling down where is making you the most profitable, and looking at others that are allowing you to burn money and such. Just taking another closer look at that. A lot of people would be shocked at what they find. So
Mike, I had Mike Beckham from Simple Modern on here, and he's built a 100 million plus company in 7 or 8 years, and he was saying that they tranche their revenue by like channel. So they they have a P&L for retail, they have a P&L for e-com, they have a P&L for wholesalers, and they just they want to know the profitability per channel, because they might say, hey, we still want to grow this year, but we only want to grow in the channels that are most profitable for us, and the ones that we're actually losing, or maybe it's half the gross margin that we're used to, we're gonna be less aggressive to scaling that side out, which I thought was an interesting way to kind of think about their, instead of just like overall margins and revenue.
Yeah. Essentially just cutting the fat. So whether it's in the platforms or where you're spending ads, marketing, maybe services you're using. So just seeing like ultimately what's absolutely necessary for your business and just trying to get lead. So yeah.
Sweet. Cool. Well, tons of fun. You have a lot of exposure to different companies and e-commerce, and you kind of were at the start of some of these social platforms and direct to consumer businesses. So always interesting to hear your perspective and get another Miami person on the podcast, and appreciate you spending some time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Out of the Woods podcast. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. More episodes are on the way. If you want to keep the conversation going, suggest questions, or nominate guests for future episodes, you can reach me on Twitter at Michael Martocci. Good luck and see you next time.